Ever tried picturing life without a fridge? Like no more those late night snacks or, a nice cold drink. It's like mind blowing,
I
right?
know, right?
But for the Amish, it's just normal life. They've figured out how to keep their meat good without electricity using these techniques that have been passed down for like
It's
generations.
a time capsule of food knowledge.
Exactly. And we're diving deep into a Frugal Solutions YouTube video today to like see how they actually do it. Who knows? Maybe we'll learn a thing or two ourselves.
I'm always up for learning from tradition.
Hmm.
What's interesting about the Amish is that they've taken what most would see as a restriction and turned it into like an art form.
Right.
Their ways of doing things not only keep the food safe, but they make it taste amazing and connect them to their, roots.
Totally. Speaking of taste, let's start with something simple but super important. Salt.
Salt.
Yeah, we all use it, but the Amish, oh, they take salt to a whole other level.
Well, think about salt, like, a tiny sponge.
Yeah.
It pulls all the moisture out of the meat and basically says, no bacteria allowed. No party here.
It's like a microscopic bouncer.
Yeah. And it's been used this way for, like, forever. I mean, it's kind of crazy how important such a basic thing is for keeping food safe,
Because
right?
that's where the phrase worth your salt comes from, right? Like Roman soldiers used to get paid in salt.
Exactly. It was, like, super valuable back then.
Yeah.
Literally worth its weight in gold, as they say.
Okay, so salt is the base, but the Amish don't stop there. Now we got to talk about smoking.
Oh, yeah, smoking.
Just imagine like rows and rows of hams and sausages and bacon all hanging in these Amish kitchens, getting infused with that smoky goodness.
And that smoke does way more than just make it taste good, It actually has all these natural chemicals that stop bacteria from growing. It keeps the meat good for months, sometimes even a whole year.
No way, a whole year.
Yeah, it's true.
I tried smoking meat once in my backyard, and let's just say my neighbors weren't too happy. They thought I had started some huge bonfire.
Oh, no.
It's definitely a skill, that's for sure.
The Amish have gotten really good at it over time.
Hmm.
They're super picky about the wood they use, like hickory or apple wood, and each one gives the meat its own special flavor.
It's like they're composing a flavor symphony using different woods like instruments.
That's a great way to put it.
But there's got to be more to it than just the taste, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, hickory smoke has these things called phenolic compounds.
Hmm.
They act as antioxidants and fight off bacteria, so they help preserve the meat even more. It's like they've got the science of smoke all figured out.
Okay, so get this. This next one blew my mind. The Amish use sugar.
Sugar.
Yeah, to preserve meat. Sounds kind of crazy, right? Like more like dessert than, a way to keep food from going bad.
I know, it seems strange, but people have been using sugar to cure meat for centuries, especially for hams and bacon. It kind of works like salt pulls out the moisture, but it also makes it taste sweeter and gives it this, like, really complex flavor.
So it's like nature's candied bacon that lasts forever.
Pretty much. Though it can get a little sticky during the process, the Amish have a trick, though. They often dry the meat after they cure it with sugar to, like, firm it up.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's switch gears to something a little tannier. Vinegar brining.
Vinegar brining. Oh, I love that.
Just think about those delicious sausages and fish.
Mm.
It's another one of those simple but genius Amish tricks.
Yeah, the acid in the vinegar basically tells the bacteria to, like, scram. It creates this environment where they can't grow.
Plus, vinegar just adds that extra zimweiger to the flavor.
Exactly. And you can get really creative with it, too. There are tons of different kinds of vinegar, like apple cider or white vinegar, and you could throw in some spices to make each batch, unique.
My grandma used to love playing around with pickling and brining. Let's just say her pickled chicken experiment. Not so much a success.
Oh, no. Pickled chicken.
Yeah, it was. An experience. We all learned a valuable lesson that day.
Trial and error, right. It's funny, vinegar has been used to preserve food since, like, ancient times.
Sure.
The Egyptians and Romans were all about it.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Proof that it really works.
Okay, ready for something that might sound a little old-fashioned? Lard.
Lard. Now there's a classic.
I know it's like not the trendiest ingredient these days, but the Amish have been using it forever. It's not just for cooking either. They use it to preserve meat too.
Oh, yeah. Rendering lard is one of those traditional techniques that's making a comeback. Basically, you heat up animal fat to separate the liquid lard from, the solid bits.
And what's cool is that when you pour that liquid lard over cooked meat, it hardens and creates this like airtight seal. Keeps the meat fresh for months.
It's like a natural vacuum sealer.
Exactly. And here's a fun fact. Lard actually has more of those good fats, the monounsaturated ones, than a lot of the processed food we eat today.
Who knew, right?
Okay, now imagine this. We're stepping back in time, going into an Amish root cellar.
A root cellar. I love those.
It's cool and dark, filled with these smells of, like, preserved foods. It's like something out of a history book, right?
Totally. Root cellars are basically like Mother Nature's refrigerator. They stay at this perfect temperature and humidity, so food lasts way longer, no electricity needed.
No electricity. That's amazing. They really know how to work with nature, don't they?
They really do. And it's not just the temperature that matters. It's got to be the right amount of moisture in the air, too.
Hmm.
Not too dry, not too damp, just perfect to keep the meat from drying out or getting moldy. They've got it down to a science.
My neighbor tried to build a root cellar once, but it kind of backfired. Ended up attracting a whole family of raccoons instead of preserving food.
Oh, no, raccoons.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. Definitely made me realize there's more to it than just digging a hole in the ground.
That's for sure. Amish root cellars are super well designed. They have special vents for airflow and ways to keep the water out. It's all about keeping the conditions just right.
Makes sense. Speaking of using what nature gives you, when winter comes around, the Amish have another trick up their sleeve. Outdoor freezing.
Outdoor freezing. That sounds intense.
I know, right? It's like their backyard turns into one giant freezer.
Wait, so they just hang the meat outside?
Pretty much. When it gets below freezing, they just let the cold air do its thing. It's so simple, but it works.
Wow, I bet they have to be careful about, like, snow and rain, though.
Oh yeah, definitely. They usually cover the meat with like burlap or something to keep it protected, but still let the air circulate.
That's smart.
And here's something you might not know. Freezing can actually make meat taste better and have a nicer texture.
Really? How does that work?
Well, the freezing helps to break down those tough muscle fibers so that the meat ends up more tender.
It's like nature's tenderizer. I love it.
Okay, let's switch gears to something a little more familiar. Drying.
Drying. The OG of preservation methods.
Exactly. We all love jerky, right? That's basically meat that's been dried out. And the Amish have been doing this for ages. They hang the meat in a well-ventilated place and let the natural heat and air do the work.
It's amazing how effective something so simple can be.
Right. And dried meat is super versatile. You can eat it straight up, add it to soups, or even grind it into a powder to, boost the flavor and protein in other dishes. I gotta say, though, homemade jerky is way better than that stuff you get at the store.
Oh, yeah, totally agree. Amish jerky is in a league of its own.
Okay, now let's talk about a method that might sound more modern, but the Amish have been using it forever. Pressure canning. Have you ever seen those, like, rows and rows of jars filled with preserved food?
Oh, yeah, it's like a work of art.
I know, right? It's pretty impressive. Pressure canning is kind of like making these tiny time capsules of food. You pack the meat into jars and cook it under high pressure. It kills any bacteria and creates this airtight seal so the food stays good for years.
Years.
Yeah. Seriously. It's like having a pantry full of meals that are ready to go no matter what happens. My friend's family used to can everything: beef, chicken, veggies, you name it.
Wow, that's incredible. It really shows how self-sufficient they are.
Okay, one last preservation method, and this one's for the adventurers out there. It's called pemmican.
Pemmican. I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is.
It's basically a mix of dried meat, fat, and sometimes berries all blended together. Native Americans and, like, those old school explorers used to rely on it.
Sounds intense. Why is it so special?
Well, it's packed with nutrients and it can last for years if you store it right. It's like the ultimate survival food. I tried making it once, though, and it didn't go so well.
What happened?
It was supposed to be this, like, solid bar, but it ended up more like a sticky, gooey mess.
Oh, no.
Yeah, not my finest moment in the kitchen. I have to give the Amish credit. They've definitely mastered this ancient recipe.
It sounds like it takes some serious skill.
It does. But it's all part of this bigger picture, right? The Amish show us that preserving food doesn't have to be complicated or rely on fancy gadgets.
That's so true.
It's about understanding how things work, respecting tradition, and using simple methods that have stood the test of time. It's pretty inspiring when you think about it.
It really is. And honestly, we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to learn about the amazing ways the Amish preserve meat.
Right. There's a whole world of knowledge waiting to be uncovered. Welcome back. I'm still kind of blown away by those root cellars, Like,
Yeah.
how do they keep all that food fresh without even plugging anything in? Makes you think twice about how much we rely on our fridges, huh?
It really shows how in tune they are with nature, right?
Yeah.
They've turned natural processes into their own preservation systems.
Before we go any further, I want to go back to salt for a sec. I know we touched on it before, but it seems like it's like the key ingredient in so many of these Amish preservation methods.
It's true. Salt really is the foundation. But even though it's so basic, there's a real art to how the Amish use it. Like, they really understand the science behind it, how much salt to use for different meats and stuff.
So it's more than just like grabbing the salt shaker and going crazy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They've got all these specific techniques for using salt, like dry curing, brining, that even combining it with other ingredients to get the exact flavor and texture they want.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's jump back to smoking for a minute. We talked about the different kinds of wood they use, but I'm kind of curious about how they actually do it. What makes their smoked meat so special?
Well, one of the big things is that they smoke their meat low and slow. Instead of blasting it with high heat, they take their time, letting that gentle smoke work its magic over hours and hours.
So it's all about patience, huh?
Exactly. That's how they get those deep, smoky flavors that Amish smoked meats are known for. It lets that smoke really penetrate the meat.
You know, it's funny. We're so used to everything being fast and instant these days that we kind of forget about the whole slow food movement,
I
right?
know. There's something really special about taking your time and doing things the old-fashioned way. And the Amish really get that.
Okay, I gotta admit, I'm still kind of stuck on the whole sugar thing. Using sugar to preserve meat just sounds so, I don't know, weird.
I know, right? But it actually works,
Hmm.
especially for things like ham and bacon. The sugar teams up with the salt to pull out the moisture and make it tough for bacteria to grow.
And it adds that sweetness and makes the flavor more complex too, right?
Exactly. Though you do have to be careful not to use too much sugar, or it can get overly sweet or even sticky. But the Amish, they've had generations to perfect this technique. They know exactly how to do it right,
It's like they've got all these secret family recipes passed down through the years.
pretty much.
Okay, let's move on to something else that I love, vinegar brining. It's amazing how something as simple as vinegar can transform and preserve meat.
Vinegar is a powerhouse when it comes to preservation. It's super acidic, so it creates this environment where bacteria just can't survive.
Plus, it adds that delicious tanginess that I just can't get enough of, and there are so many different ways to use it. You can try different kinds of vinegar and add all sorts of herbs and spices to create your own unique flavors.
Exactly. The Amish often use apple cider vinegar for a sweeter taste, white vinegar for that classic tang, or even red wine vinegar for something a little more, fancy.
It's like they're painting with vinegar, creating all these different flavor profiles. Okay, let's talk about something a little less glamorous, but still super important, lard rendering. I'll be honest, I used to be kind of grossed out by the whole idea of it, but learning about how the Amish use lard has definitely changed my mind.
It's all about using every part of the animal, right?
Mm.
Reducing waste and getting the most out of what you have. That's something the Amish are really good at.
And it works so well for preserving meat. The rendered lard makes this airtight seal over the cooked meat and keeps it good for months.
Nature's vacuum sealer, basically.
Exactly. And we talked about this before, but it's worth repeating. Lard actually has a lot of healthy fats, too. Those monounsaturated fats that are good for you.
It's true. It's definitely gotten a bad rap over the years.
Okay, let's take another trip back to those root cellars. What are some of the things that make them so effective at keeping food fresh?
Well, Amish root cellars are usually built underground, where the temperature stays pretty consistent year-round. They're also designed with special vents and stuff to make sure there's good airflow and the humidity stays just right.
So it's like they've created this perfect little microclimate down there, right?
Exactly. And they do it all without any fancy technology. It's all about working with nature.
You know, it's funny how we think of progress as always moving forward and using the latest gadgets and stuff, but sometimes the old ways are the best, right?
Totally agree. The Amish are a great reminder that simple solutions can be the most effective ones.
Okay, let's talk about how the Amish use the cold winter weather to their advantage. It's called outdoor freezing, and it's basically like their whole backyard turns into a giant freezer.
Outdoor freezing, that sounds intense.
It is. When the temperatures drop below freezing, they just hang their meat outside and let the cold air do the work.
Wow, that's so simple but so smart. But I bet they have to be careful about, snow and rain and stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. They'll usually cover the meat with something like burlap to protect it from the elements, but still let the air circulate. And here's a fun fact. Freezing can actually make meat taste better and have a better texture.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, when you freeze meat, it helps to break down some of those tough muscle fibers, so it ends up being more tender.
Like a natural tenderizer. I love that.
Okay, let's move on to another classic preservation method, drying.
Drying, one of the oldest tricks in the book.
Exactly. We all know about beef jerky, right? It's just
Mhm.
meat that's been dried out. And the Amish have been doing this for centuries, using the natural heat and airflow to remove moisture from the meat.
It's amazing how something so simple can be so effective.
And dried meat is so versatile, you can eat it as a snack, add it to soups and stews, or even grind it up into a powder to add flavor and protein to other dishes.
Exactly. It's one of those ingredients that can really elevate a dish.
Now let's talk about a method that might sound a little more modern, but the Amish have been doing it for ages. Pressure canning, it's kind of like making little time capsules of food, right?
It is. You seal up the food in jars and cook it under high pressure, which kills off any bacteria and creates an airtight seal. It's amazing food can last for years this way.
I know. It's like having a secret stash of ready-to-eat meals in your pantry. I have a friend whose family used to can all sorts of things. Beef, chicken, vegetables, you name it.
That's incredible. I love that idea of having a pantry full of homemade goodness that you can rely on.
Okay, last but not least, we got to talk about pemmican. It's a little more adventurous, but super fascinating.
Pemmican. I feel like I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is.
It's a mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes berries, all mashed up together. It's super high in calories and can last for years if you store it properly.
Wow, that sounds like the ultimate survival food.
It is. Native Americans and early explorers relied on it all the time. I tried making it once, but it didn't turn out so well.
Oh no, what happened?
It was supposed to be this, like, solid bar, but it ended up kind of gooey and messy. Not exactly appetizing.
I can imagine. Sounds like it takes some practice.
Definitely. I have to give the Amish credit. They've definitely mastered the art of making pemmican. But it all comes back to what we were talking about before, right? The Amish remind us that preserving food doesn't have to be complicated or require fancy gadgets.
Right. It's about understanding the basics, respecting tradition, and using simple methods that have worked for generations.
Exactly. And there's so much we can learn from their resourcefulness and their commitment to sustainability. It's about making the most of what you have and wasting as little as possible.
It's a really valuable lesson, especially in today's world.
Well said. Welcome back to our deep dive into Amish meat preservation. It's been a wild ride, right?
It really has. Who knew there were so many ways to keep meat fresh without, a fridge?
I know. And what's really stuck with me is how it's not just about like the practical side of things for the Amish, it's about their culture and their traditions too.
Totally. It's like these techniques are woven into their way of life.
You know, one thing I keep thinking about is just how resourceful they are. They don't waste anything. Every ingredient, every little scrap, it all gets
It's
used.
a really different mindset from what a lot of us are used to.
Right, totally. Like we're so quick to just buy new stuff and throw things away. The Amish make it look so, I don't know, effortless.
Well, it's not effortless, obviously. It takes a lot of knowledge and skill. But there's definitely a beauty in that simplicity. Like they're living in harmony with nature and not creating all this waste.
And I love how it's not just about individual families either. It's about the whole community coming together.
Absolutely. Think about those canning parties or everyone working together to build a root cellar. It brings people together and makes them stronger as a community.
It's like these preservation methods are preserving more than just food, right? They're preserving a way of life.
That's a great way to put it. It's about passing down those traditions and those skills from one generation to the next, keeping that connection to the past alive.
It makes me think about how important food is for bringing people together. It's not just about eating, it's about sharing and connecting and like remembering where we came from.
Food is definitely a powerful thing. It can nourish our bodies and our souls.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering what we can take away from all of this. Like, I'm not about to ditch my fridge anytime soon, but I definitely feel inspired to, try some new things in my kitchen.
Me too. I think the biggest takeaway is the idea of slowing down and really appreciating the process of making things from scratch.
We live in such a fast-paced world, we want everything instantly. We've kind of lost touch with that, like, hands-on approach to making food.
Exactly. The Amish remind us that there's so much satisfaction in learning those traditional skills and understanding where our food comes from.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. Even just starting with something small like pickling some vegetables or making jam can be a really rewarding experience.
Totally. And once you get comfortable with those basics, you can start experimenting with more advanced techniques like drying meat or pressure canning.
And who knows, maybe by doing some of these things ourselves, we can kind of rediscover that sense of community and connection that we were talking about.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Imagine neighbors helping each other can tomatoes or sharing their secret pickle recipes. It's a really beautiful idea.
Well said. So, to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Amish meat preservation. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to try some of these techniques yourselves.
Happy preserving, everyone.
Ah.
And until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.